Yes.
So,
How is everything?
Not bad, not bad.
A lot of work.
A lot of work and I am not 25 years old anymore.
God. Well, wait, Jeff is, he's 21, today's his birthday,
That's right. Jeff is 21 today.
21 today, so.
Well,
Ask
like the
Jeff
many
how it
churches,
feels.
it's time for Rabbi to have a satellite in Ventura.
intimate Torah. I love it.
Oh, I like that
Yeah,
idea.
we're gonna plant the,
Yeah.
we're gonna plant
PA West. Come on.
our church. So, welcome everybody. We're now streaming on Zoom and we've got, oh, well, not for me, for them. Oh, I'm not a banana person. Thank you though. No, I'm not share it around. So we just celebrated Simchat Torah tonight. Wait, Mike, are you fixing our thing? Or did you go to the bathroom? Oh, we just need to hit the button there. That is, so we kind of finished off the holidays last night, but
Fun.
it was fun. And we had an interesting holiday season this year. I think in the midst of everything, it just seemed like there was a day by day anti-Semitic something over the last 2 weeks. I don't even know what to call it. Just didn't stop. No.
And I was talking to Tim about that last night, because there's recognition of every prejudice in the whole world. right now. But I never, it's always just taken about.
Yeah. Well, it seems like
You're the healing part of that.
there's a lot of reasons for that, right? But I mean, everybody's talking about why is it still prevalent and why, but then it just like it happens. And then there's like comes from another source and another style and another version of it.
Where's the cancel culture?
What?
Where's the cancel culture?
There's a what?
Where is the cancel culture on anti-Semitism?
Yeah, exactly, John. So there's no there. Well, the funny thing is that's actually one of the things that Kanye said was that we invented cancel culture, which is weird because if we did, why is it not working on this? So
Wait, he said we the Jews?
yeah, oh yeah, that was part of.
I've been out of touch.
Who do you think invented cancel? He said, "Who do you think invented cancel culture?" That's what he had said.
Who said this?
He was
Sorry, I've been out of touch too.
He was complaining about Mark Zuckerberg throwing them off of Facebook and Instagram. So what he said was, "Who do you think invented cancel culture?" As a reminder that Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, it's just insane.
Ugh.
And then, of course, at the same day, Elon Musk said, "Welcome to Twitter." So it just kind of defies. No, but what was weird about it is that he invoked a lot of the Black Hebrew Israelite anti-Semitism, which is, that the African Americans are the true Jews and that Jews have hijacked Judaism. I mean, I'll just tell you, it's a lot of weird stuff. But then you had the weird dual loyalty charge, which kind of was the stuff with the Trump one yesterday, which was that, you better get behind Israel before it's too late, which, look, there's a lot of stuff that Trump said in those words that I kind of agree with, but not like, first of all, it's insane to say for anybody who's a Gentile to tell Jews what they should do with regarding Israel to some extent. I mean, let's face it, there are people, Jews are entitled to have, their feelings about Israel, and if it is a country that we have an allegiance to or a feeling about, we're entitled to have those feelings and not have somebody else tell us what the feeling. Jonathan Greenblatt, yeah.
He was articulate on that.
Yeah, yes. So I will say that, so those stuff, well, since we're discussing, I'll just pop it up. because you really, you,
Value issue. It's not a big deal.
I'm not really sure what why it even came out. So it just seems so weird right after the Kanye thing that we had to deal with another one. So let me just show you rather than have people talk about what he said, this is what he said. So I'm just going to pop it up here. This was the actual quote yesterday from his Truth Social. No, this is what he put up. So I'm not really sure what I don't even know where it came from. So I don't know what the impetus for this one was, but here it is. I'm going to try to find out. I'm talking to some people who are close to him. So I want to know what is why did this have to happen? Why did this have to happen now? So no, seriously, I mean, hold it. Okay, because look, rather than me tell you what he said, I want to just show it to you. Why people posted pieces of it, but again, everybody kind of quoted around it. I know, but he quoted it.
It's new name. Kanye's new name.
Yeah. So here is hold it a second. Let me just pop it. Gosh, he posts a lot. There's
How far do you think that goes?
no, that's a serious thing. No, it's a
Oh, I thought you were still talking about Trump.
no.
Kanye.
So here's the full, gosh, I keep seeing, the quote around it, but I want to show you the actual, people would comment on the
Come to class one day.
Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think
Remotely.
I don't think so. I don't think
He has a couple of apologies next year.
he will not be apologizing. That I will bet money on.
I don't think you can say that word.
No, I think you're both right.
Okay, so, hold it a second. Look, I just I'm going to post it up and then people can, I was gonna, but because I like every article that I'm showing, it's commenting on it within it, and I don't want to show that. Here's the Forbes article. I just looked on Truth and I couldn't get.
Maybe he took it down already.
Did he?
I don't know. I'm speculating. Sorry.
Oh. I know people posted pieces of it. I don't want to show pieces of it. That's 100% what I don't want to do, because I don't want anybody to say stuff was taken out of context. This wasn't the full. This is because I did see screenshots of it.
Why don't we call Erica? I'm sure she does.
No, okay. Here, wait. There's
You're on fire today.
these are all the comments about it. I don't want to show the comments. I have so this was on Sunday. This tweet, or what, I don't know what people do on Truth Social, but the comment, the post. Oh man. Because I've seen it and now I can't find it. It might have been taken down. It might have been taken down because people were, so the other thing about it that was interesting was that it actually kind of pitted Jews versus evangelicals, because what he said was evangelicals appreciate Israel more. What? No, Trump. No, I'm talking about the yay is old news. That's old. That's from 2 weeks. That's from 2 weeks ago. I'm talking about 2 days ago. Anyways, if I find the whole thing, I'm gonna and I don't want to show you what other people said about it, because quite frankly, it doesn't matter. Yes.
Is this not the whole thing? That's connected to his, that's connected to Ronnie's. It was a link.
Yeah, this is not the actual screenshot of it, but it has everything on it.
Okay.
So here's what it says.
Okay.
No president has done more for Israel than I have. Somewhat surprisingly, however, our wonderful evangelicals are far more appreciative of this than the people of the Jewish faith, especially those living in the US. Those living in Israel, though, are a different story. Highest approval rating in the world could easily be PM. US Jews have to get their act together and appreciate what they have in Israel before it is too late. Now, I agree with a lot of what he said, which is that American
Okay,
Jews
I got it.
have to appreciate what they have in Israel. But there's no comment behind it. But I don't know what before it's too late.
Here it
means.
is.
What?
I found it.
Yeah. No, I just read it, Rosemary. I
Yeah,
read the whole thing.
but yeah, I just found it on Truth though, and it's still up.
It's still there? Okay. So what I was saying is, I don't know what before it's too late means. I think I know what it means, but I don't want to read into it. I think it actually means before Israel is gone, before Israel is destroyed. But I don't, but some people felt that it was. That's Reverend Lynn, you said that, I didn't, so
What did
I'm
she say?
fine. I'm fine with Reverend Lynn. So for those who didn't say it, you didn't hear it. She said, will it be gone when the second coming happens? Well, by the way, that leads into what we're going to read about. But first, it is what we're talking about today. 100%. We're talking about the second coming today. But we want to wish Jeff happy birthday. Jeff is here in person. Are we saying ye or yeah?
Yay.
He's not. Jeff is not Kanye. That's what I'll tell you. One thing I never looked at Jeff Stein and said, I keep thinking of Kanye. Every time I see him, I say, Kanye. He's got a little afro. He's got a little afro, I'd say a little bit. Like me, he's got a Jupro. It's so let's wish him happy birthday, everybody. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Many more. Many more. Yeah. He is in great shape now. We're very grateful for that too. So yeah, no, that's also not Jeff. We're
That honey whiskey was pretty darn good last night.
I know, but it's not everybody's cup of tea, but that's good stuff, right?
That was very good.
So we had
Very good.
Simchat Torah. We had a little bit of drink, not very much though. Come on, nobody drank that much last. But you're supposed to be joyous on Simchat Torah, and you can have fun, but you don't. So we are having fun right now. Absolutely. So last week, Rosemary read for us, and we had a chance to look at had a chance to look at the death of Ahab, King Ahab. Now Ahab was told essentially he battled Elijah back and forth, and Elijah assumedly was older than him when all this stuff was going on, but Elijah survives him, confronts him throughout his life, and then he survives. Elijah, they try to kill Elijah. He doesn't, they can't find him sometimes. Sometimes Ahab listens to Elijah and seems to respect Elijah. But then Elijah dies, and his son, Ahaziah, takes over. And we read about that. So Ahaziah takes over. His mother Jezebel is still in the background. I don't know if we're going to get to the death of Jezebel today, but we are going to look at what happens, because the last thing we read about was that Ahaziah dies. He actually falls in his quarters, perhaps even in his bathroom, in his private chambers. He asks Elijah what's going to happen, and Elijah sends, he asks another prophet what's going to happen. And of course, that really sets Elijah off. And as we read last week, Elijah gives message to, remember, Ahaziah asked Baal-Zebub whether he was going to get better, and Elijah, yeah, 2 Kings 1:9. And then Elijah says he's going to die. He gets the message back to him. Look, you went to ask a foreign god whether you're going to live. Well, you're going to die. And Ahaziah finds out it's Elijah. He sends men after him. If you remember, 3 groups of 50 soldiers. They keep getting burned up. The first 2, and finally the last of the 50 says, "Hey, come on, leave us alone. We're only doing our job." And so he goes back with Ahaziah, with the captain, to Elijah, and Elijah tells Ahaziah that he's going to die, and he does die. And it says after that King Jehoram succeeded him as king in the 2nd year of King Jehoram. That's a little confusing. There are 2 King Jehorams. One of them's in the north now, and one of them's in the south. And the King Jehoram, and I'm going to show you the chart in a second. The thing that's interesting about this is that they're actually related. We're going to see that. Yeah. No, they were related. They're not.
It's not like James 4 and 6 or whatever his numbers.
No, they're different guys. My point is they're different guys, but they're actually connected. Yeah, we're going to see why in a second. But what's interesting is that Jehoram is Ahaziah's brother, because Jehoram takes over when he's still fairly young, and Ahaziah never had kids, because it says he had no son. Well, doesn't mean he has no kids. He has no son, by the way. It says he has no son. So maybe he had a daughter, but he had no son. And so his brother takes over. And as we said last week, the real power behind the throne is their mother anyways. So she's still alive, and she's still very much in control. And by the way, we're about to see that another woman becomes very much in control in the south, in the kingdom of Judah. So women were sometimes very powerful. And definitely thinking about that, because I'm watching the Game of Thrones. I'm watching another. Yeah, but I was watching that the new one, the House of the Dragon, and the mother, the daughter, whatever. It's all confusing, but it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. Rosemary, what do you think?
I haven't been watching it.
She can't comment on it. All I can say is that it is not as good as probably the first one, but it's still, I think, worth watching. I don't know. Anyone else?
Last episode was pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, it's definitely worth watching. I did something really foolish last night. So I'm all caught up now on Game of Thrones. I was like a couple episodes back, and I watched it. And I like to watch like 2 or 3 episodes at a time. I don't like missing, forgetting. It was yeah, I can't remember, whatever it was. It was last night. But then I did something really stupid. Then I did something really dumb, which is I hadn't watched it yet. I started watching Lord of the Rings, the new. So what am I, some kind of nut? I can't keep track of Game of Thrones. I'm going to start watching this other Michigas, and I'm sitting there going, I don't remember who's going. I'm ruining my mind now with all these swords and sorcery stuff.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm not watching Game of Thrones, because I'm watching Lord of the Rings.
I know it's too much. I got too much on my head, but anyways, it's good though. So Amazon Prime's got the Lord of the Rings thing, and then Game of Thrones is on HBO, the Blood of the Dragon or House of the Dragon. But I don't know. I like House of the Dragon, but the women on that show, the House of the Dragon show, it's really about the women kind of jockeying for a position.
Much more strategy.
What?
Much more about strategy.
Yeah, it's about strategy, but the women are the ones who are actually trying to figure out like which woman is going to be in power, because the women are not supposed to be in power. And so it's about like kind of how they are, like, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, which woman's going to be in power. And again, some of it is about passing that on to your son. But it also, as you can see, is also about the women themselves protecting their lives and protecting their own legacy and creating a legacy, which for a queen mother would have been pretty important. So
Jezebel have a title?
no, it's interesting. She doesn't have a title, but she is called the queen, or but we'll take a look at the women coming up. We're probably not going to get to her today. The focus is interestingly really on Elijah now. So as the last thing we read was that Ahaziah's reign are in the annals of the kings of Israel, right? So we don't really know anything about him. We read one story that he basically falls down and dies, and he wants to know whether he's going to live or not, and pretty much that's it. We don't know anything else about him, and he doesn't reign that long. So his brother takes over, and now we're going to go back to the prophets, and I'll show you just real quick because we are going to return to this, but this is the chart of the prophets and the kings in Judah and Israel, and so you can see right now we are in we're in the time of Jehoshaphat and Jehoram, and then we're in the time of Ahab, Ahaziah, and Joram. That's Jehoram or Joram. So you can see there's two Jehorams. One of them's the son of Ahab, and the other one is the son of Jehoshaphat. And as you can see, there's also Ahaziah here and an Ahaziah here. So it's a little confusing.
So what are relationships? They're brothers?
No, they're not brothers, but you'll see where they are in a second. So, and here you can see the prophet that's working in the north. It's Elijah, and now we're going to get into Elisha today. We were introduced to him as a disciple, but we're actually going to see him at work a little bit. And then here is in the south, we actually read about a couple of prophets. We don't read a lot about them. And the focus really isn't on the prophets in Judah until we get to these guys, Isaiah and Micah. So we're not there yet. So far, we've been reading about these prophets up here a little bit more. And that's what we're going to read about today, the prophets in the north, Elijah and Elisha. Because you can see right here is 2 Kings 1 and 2. And here's Elisha. We were introduced to him, and now 2 Kings 2 through 9, which is where we are today.
Jerusalem is actually in the north, correct?
Well, Jerusalem is on the border, right? But it's kind of in the tribe of Benjamin. So it really should be kind of in the north, but it's right on the border. So it is part of its surroundings would be in the south, but really the capital would have been in the north, would have been in the tribe of Benjamin. So this is where we're going to start off with the story of the transfer of power from Elijah to Elisha. But here's where it begins. Rosemary, if you'd like to start our journey.
When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha had set out from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to Bethel." "As the Lord lives and as you live," said Elisha, "I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel.
So this is an important part of this relationship. We really haven't heard anything about them talking back and forth because Elijah basically told Elisha, "Come with me." Elisha says, "Can I say goodbye to my family?" And Elijah seems a little annoyed by that, but he lets him go back, says goodbye to his family. But this is the first time we've had a conversation really between the two of them about, well, I guess that was a conversation, but this is actually a conversation back and forth, more than one sentence. This now, though, sets up we're going to have another interesting kind of thing like we had with Elijah and the people, the captains coming after him, which is like a repetitious story. So the way that this story goes, Elijah basically tells Elisha, "I am going, God has called me and I got to go to Bethel." And Elisha says, "Well, I'm going with you." So again, Elijah tells him, "Stay here, don't come with me." And Elisha says, "I am coming with you." And the phrase is, "As the Lord lives and you live." By the way, notice that phrase, "As the Lord lives and you live, I'm going with you." So he's basically saying, I'm not leaving you alone. Now, we know from the very beginning of the story that Elijah is about to be taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Well, wow, that's a pretty substantial piece of information, because people don't normally go up to heaven in a whirlwind. That's not the way people normally leave the world. And it's not even clear that he's gonna even ever die. Because leaving in the whirlwind, maybe that's the way you're dying, or maybe you're entering heaven and you're not dying. Which, as we said last week, leads us to the possibilities that something very strange is going on with Elijah, in that either he's a human being who's being taken up to heaven, he's being transfigured, as we would say, fancy in the Christian scriptures, he's being transfigured. But as we said, it already was a Jewish concept to some extent, maybe even going back to Enoch. Was he an angel here the whole time? Was he ever really a human being?
And there's a hint for that because he doesn't care for people nor to angels.
Correct. And he seems to be dispassionate at the very least about human beings. He can wipe them out and not even think about it. He doesn't really ever seem to understand human suffering in a way. Because if we think about that scene where he's in the house with the widow and the kid dies, she basically says, "Hey, can you save my son?" He doesn't really make any effort on his own to save the boy. Who? Elisha? Maybe. Could be. No, that kid doesn't have a name. That kid doesn't have a name. No. We don't know. Well, the one reason why we wouldn't think it's the same kid is because Elisha has a family, has a father and a mother. The other guy, the kid didn't have, just had a mother. There is a legend, a midrash, that kid was none other than baby Jonah, or little Jonah. That Jonah and Elijah had this bond. It's a possibility. It's possible that Elijah would have overlapped with Jonah, but it's also possible that they lived 100 years apart. But it's possible, but it doesn't seem like he cares about people. It's just, we talked about too, seems to be Jonah, a little bit of Jonah's problem as well, which is he doesn't seem to care that much about humanity. But something to think about. So far, Elisha, though, says, "I'm not going to leave you alone," when he says, "I got to go to Bethel." And he, by the way, he does not tell Elisha that I'm going up to heaven in a whirlwind. And by the way, we don't even know that Elijah knows he's going to be taken up to heaven. He just knows that God wants to talk to him. That's all Elijah says. So we don't know whether Elijah knows what's about to happen. We don't know. He just knows that God says, "I've got to go to Bethel." So here's what happened.
Disciples of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that the Lord will take your master away from you today?" He replied, "I know it too. Be silent."
So whatever Elijah said to him, it just said, "I'm going to Bethel." Elisha is a prophet and assumedly gets messages or voices and things from God.
Elisha's a female or a
Man.
In Hebrew scriptures, is there a last prophet?
No, there's no identifiable last prophet, but there are people who we say are, no, stop it. We say that there's hardly. So is there any indication who that last prophet is? Look, we say the last prophets are Malachi, Haggai, and Zechariah. Those are the last three prophets that we have books from, right? They're the last prophets that we would say chronologically lived around the 4th century BCE. So 300s, 400s. That's about the last time we say prophecies were still going on, which is important because Elijah's in one of those prophecies. What? Yeah, but remember, that's only 100 years after, 150 years after they come back. So if they come back in the 500s, 400s, whatever, they start coming back. The Jews, when the Jews come back from Babylon during Ezra's time, it's about 400, 450, whatever, they're starting to make themselves a presence in Israel, that some of those prophets then for about the next 100 and 150 years, Jews at least still think, hey, God will talk to us.
Were those prophets from the exile or?
Yeah, these are people, well, assumedly we don't know much about their background, Malachi and these other people, whether they were exiled and part of those families or whether they were part of the families that stayed behind. We don't know anything about them, but it's possible that they were exiled and then brought back. But for people who actually we say that are prophets, those are the last people. I mean, Ezra to some extent, we consider him like prophetic in a way, like he's like a Moses, but he's more of a scribe, he's more of a priest, he's more of a religious political leader, not necessarily a prophetic person. These guys that are prophets, that are working as prophets, that are recognized as prophets, that people say, well, they're prophets. Again, to some extent, why do we say that these last three guys are prophets? Because there's books of the Bible. They're not very long books. We're going to look at Malachi in a second. Malachi. It's a 3-chapter book. In some ways that they order it, it's 4 chapters, but it's 4 chapters and 5 verses. It's very short. And it's just not, we don't know that much about these guys. And what seems to happen during this 7th and 8th century, that there's whole groups of prophets, hundreds of prophets, and that they work together. Because when these prophets come out and talk to Elisha, it says that they are there in Bethel. They come out to him, and there's more than one. And they say to him, Elijah's going away. And he goes, I know. Don't talk about it. Right? Hush. Be quiet. Yeah. All right. Well, I told you, this is a repeated story. Here we go.
Then Elijah said to him, Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me unto Jericho. As the Lord lives and as you live, said Elisha, I will not leave you. So they went on to Jericho. The disciples of the prophets who were at Jericho came over to Elisha and said to him, do you know that the Lord will take your master away from you today? He replied, I know it too. Be silent.
So you see the repetition in this story. Tour. Yeah. And what's interesting, and I'm going to pop it up real quickly so you can see it.
This is all happening after.
No, before, no, he hasn't died. No, we heard he's going to die. We're told he's, not that he's going to die, but that he's going to get taken up.
Just hasn't gotten to the gate yet.
No, he's and let me just show you real quick too.
I was having a good place moment.
So let's just show a quick map just to give people a little their bearings here. So, well, that's what I'm going to show you. So assumedly he's up here. Let's see, so he's up here. The last time we heard about Elijah, he was dealing with King Ahaziah here in Samaria, which is up here. Right. So then he goes down to Bethel, which is about 30 miles. It's a good day. It's a good day's journey. And then he goes from Bethel to Jericho, which is right here. They're probably walking, and they probably aren't. Yeah, they probably don't have a camel. They probably don't have any stuff with them at this stage. Yeah. Well, let's take a look. So they go from here, probably around here somewhere, to here, and then they go from here to here, which is about another day's journey. And this is not an easy journey. I mean, this journey, you're going over mountains, but you're not going very far, down or up. Going up and down, but you're not leaving the hills of Judea and this mountainous area. When you're going from Bethel to Jericho, you're going down quite a bit, and you're going down from roughly 1,000 feet high to about 1,000 feet below. So it's a long walk, and it's also a steep walk, and it's probably again another day. So these are day journeys. These are not like he's not going 2 miles. He's not walking up Lions. So here's his last So that's the second stop is Jericho.
Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to the Jordan. As the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you," he said. And the two of them went on. 50 men of the disciples of the prophets followed and stood by at a distance from them as the two of them stopped at the Jordan.
So the last stop, or I should say the last stop, this stop, it's the last stop, but the last stop, the third stop is at the Jordan, which is of course the borders of the country to some extent. It's not always, because at this time, the Judeans or the Israelites, both countries, have holdings on the other side of the Jordan River. Yeah, so it's not like they're crossing the border into another country. They're actually still within Israelite control. But look, crossing the Jordan River, everybody knows when the Israelites crossed in from the Jordan River with Joshua, that was the conquest. That's when the conquest of the land took hold. So there is something strange about Elijah now leaving the territory of Israel. He's leaving Israel and he is stepping across. He's transitioning to someplace else. And it says that says there's 50 men, disciples of the prophets, who are watching this. So there's people watching this happen. Or they're here, they're part of the group that can watch this stuff happening now, at least. I mean, there's a lot of prophets. There's prophets in Bethel, there's prophets in Jericho, there's prophets here with them. I mean, by the way, those prophets that are still with them, we could assume also that maybe those are the prophets that were at Jericho, because Jericho is right by the Jordan River. So it's possible that they just followed, some of those prophets come with them. So it says, though, that the 50 of them are there, and then the two of them stop at the Jordan River. And here's what happens in this very dramatic scene.
Thereupon Elijah took his mantle and rolling it up, he struck the water. It divided to the right and left, so that the two of them crossed over on dry land. As they were crossing, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha answered, "Let a double portion of your spirit pass on to me."
All right, so Elijah splits the Jordan River, which is a miracle. I mean, it's not a huge miracle in the sense that it's not crossing the Sea of Reeds, but Joshua, remember, did the same miracle, which is split the Jordan. Excuse me, it's still pretty significant. It's still a miracle, and it's still something that people who were kind of in the distance, if they knew that this happened, they were witnessing a little bit of a miracle. Now, again, it's still a pretty private miracle, if you think about it, in the sense that maybe there's 50 people or 52 people that can see this. It is a miracle. It is a supernatural act. Again, some people have pointed out that as the Bible progresses, as we get further along in the biblical history, the miracles become less and less frequent, and they become less and less dramatic, and they become less and less public. Less and less people see the miracles. So in this case, not a lot of people are seeing this happen, but it's a pretty important miracle. And as it's happening, Elijah and Elisha are experiencing it because they're the only two that cross over. The other prophets don't come over. So they're not going to be here for this very last stop, this very last part of the journey. And Elijah says, Elisha, Elisha and Elijah are standing there. Again, the student, Elisha, is standing there next to his master. And Elijah says, "What would you like me to do before I'm taken away?" And he says, "Let a double portion of your spirit pass to me," which seems like a strange phrase, because how can I give you twice of something that I have? So it's probably a bad translation. We read other places that it seems to be like maybe a better translation is 2/3, two of your thirds. Now, why would it even be thirds? And that's an interesting idea, that maybe our spirit is divided in three kinds of sections, and maybe there's some of that we can pass on to somebody else, but maybe there's a part of our spirit that we can't pass on. So it might give us a little indication of what they believed about the spirit at the time. The word that is used here is ruach, right? It's the ruach, your ruach. So, give me some of your spirit could be translated as, Mary, what is yours translation? It says double portion. And Glory, do you have your translation there with you? Of what?
Glory's not on today.
Okay, so I'm not sure what how they translate this, but again, what is double share? Yeah, the word here is shanayim, which is twice, which is why it translates as double. But it doesn't really seem to make sense that someone could give a double portion. Another way you could say is, give me give me some of your energy, right? Double my energy by giving me your energy is another way of maybe it could be understood, because the word definitely is as a two. The word shnaim is two, so it's a second of something. So it's different thoughts about what he's asking for, but or I would say the amount maybe is of interpretation, but I think everybody sees what he's saying. Give me some of your energy. Give me some of your essence, your energy source, if you will. Right? Pass it to me. So here's what Elijah says.
You have asked a difficult thing, he said. If you see me as I am being taken from you, this will be granted to you. If not, it will not. As they kept on walking and talking, a fiery chariot with fiery horses suddenly appeared and separated one from the other, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind.
Yeah, and this is the chariot of fire. So what does the King James say? Yeah. So what does yours say, Reverend Lynn?
Same.
Chariot of fire. Yeah. So we said when the translation says a fiery chariot and fiery horses, that's not an incorrect translation, but it's not as dramatic as saying a chariot of fire. Plus, we got a great movie out of that phrase, right? A chariot of fire. The image of the fiery chariot is an interesting one, because again, the word rechev eish and susei eish, which is, let's not forget there are horses on fire here too. It's not a chariot that's on fire, just the chariot. There's actually horses, fiery horses here, horses on fire. That's pretty dramatic. Look, there are people who have speculated that this is, aliens, right? These are spaceships or whatever. People see the fire there. This is the way they describe it. They would describe it as that. Look, it's a little difficult to say that the horses are necessarily on fire unless, like if they just said a flaming chariot, maybe you'd say that, but there's also horses here. So whatever's being described here, they are definitely saying that it's big deal. It's on fire, and there is a wind, by the way, too, which is again, probably why people have speculated that maybe it's some type of spaceship, because there's wind in this. There's not just fire, there's also a whirlwind. And we know that God spoke to Elijah at Mount Sinai in a whirlwind, or didn't speak to God in the whirlwind or fire, but he saw the whirlwind and fire. So God is sometimes in those things, but sometimes isn't. Does he
see it? He then gets.
Elisha saw it. Yeah. Elisha sees it. Exactly. So Elisha sees it, which is interesting, because that's another reason why, like if for the people who like to say it's a spaceship, I guess you could say it was cloaked, and if you could see it, then what you'd have the special powers or whatever. But there does seem to be this idea that how could you not see it? If there's a whirlwind and if there's a fire, how could you not see it? Well, what's interesting about it is that that means that however God manifests, even when God manifests in a fiery whatever, in a fiery situation, a whirlwind situation, that it's possible for you and I not to see it. Which is crazy, because that means, because look, Elijah speculates, or at least puts out there, that it's possible that Elisha, his buddy, his disciple, his student, who he's been training, he likes Elisha, we assume. If Elijah likes anybody, he likes Elisha. We don't know he likes anybody, but if he likes somebody, it's this guy. He's not sure that Elisha has the power to see him. I'm just saying, on the face of it. Let's not assume that Elijah, by the way, is an angel right here, which I don't, based on this, I don't think he is. If what he says to Elisha, which is, if you see it, then you'll get this power. It means essentially that people sometimes can't see these things happening right in front of them. But literally, that could happen. Somebody could get taken up into heaven with fire and with wind and everything else, and you wouldn't see it. Because Elisha's not sure Elisha can see it. Now, you can make the argument that, like, if something happens to him while this is happening, like if he gets blown back, or if he's not there, or if, it gets too intense and he can't be there, that maybe that's what it means. It's possible. But whatever happens, it says that Elisha sees it. So he watches what happens when Elijah goes up into the whirlwind. The issue here, folks, is it doesn't seem that Elijah dies. Elijah, nowhere is his body left behind. Nowhere does it say that, a spirit went up. There's no indication that any other part of Elijah is left behind, is not there, is dead, is sloughed off. There's no indication that Elijah doesn't go up to heaven whole. Yeah.
But the next line says, then he took his own clothes and rent them in two pieces.
Well, let's read the next part. So what does Elisha say?
Elisha saw it, and he cried out, "Oh, Father, Father, Israel's chariots and horsemen." When he could no longer see him, he grasped his garments and rent them in two.
Yes. So he's watching this happen. He watches the chariot leave his sight, because it says he can no longer see him. So when they get too far away from him and he can no longer see him, he grasps his garment and rends them and tears them in two. And that's the word we use. Kriya, Vaikrayim. It's the same words that we use. And by the way, Elijah's dead, right? Elijah's gone. Now, you can make the argument Elijah is gone. Elijah's gone, but is he dead? What's, by the way, very interesting about this phrase, when it says that he tears his garments in two, which I never really noticed until just now. Remember how he wants a double portion? It's the same word, shnayim. He tears his garment. He didn't just rip his garments a few times, or he didn't tear it. It says he tore it in two. So he ripped his garments, just like he wanted two portions. He now ripped his garment in two portions. It's the same word. So he ripped them. First of all, it's a very powerful scene because he calls him father, right? He doesn't just say Elijah or my teacher. He says my father, which means that the relationship that he developed with Elijah was one of almost seeing him as a father.
Like soon, why Elijah comes around on Passover?
We're going to get, that's today.
Okay,
I promise we're going to get to, oh no, it's all queued up.
I'm waiting.
Yeah, you'll get to it. We'll get to it. All right, we'll get to it. It's here.
And you.
So Elijah is gone. Elisha reacts to his teacher to his mentor, to a man that he looks up to as a father. And he tears his garments, which is like what we do when someone dies. As far as he's concerned, Elijah's gone.
Elisha knew what he was gonna go.
It doesn't seem like in this moment
Yeah.
that Elijah ever is going to make a reappearance.
Right.
What it seems.
It seems like he's leaving the world similar to the way Moses left the world in a divine way. What's different, of course, is that there are witnesses to this. There are no witnesses to Moses dying, to Moses being taken away, or Moses, we were told Moses died. There is no death, there is no moment where this happens. Why did Elijah leave the world like this? Why did Elijah not die in a normal way?
But don't they have the same evidence about Jesus?
What?
That they don't have things that the physical things of this one says that they got his garments, but what do they have of Jesus that says that this happened, right? Or that he even had a resurrection?
Well, some Christian midrash says that the burial clothes were folded into the tomb.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah, you've heard of the Shroud of Turin, haven't you? That is the belief that was there. No, the idea of the burial garments were pretty important. However, again, they have not been verified as being from
So
that
is there
point.
not a similarity here though?
They didn't verify his burial garments, but not the right on.
Correct.
Oh, interesting,
Yes.
interesting. But isn't that similar to what's going on here?
Where?
To Elijah, what was he?
Well, so we don't know.
His presence.
We don't know, but there definitely seems to be, as you can see, this feeling that he's dead. Now, look, I will only tell you that the Bible, we're going to look at what happens to Elijah after he dies today. That's what we are going to take a look at. But but let's read what's in the Bible, which is that he's no longer there. And Elisha at least seems to feel that this is it. He's not going to see him again. I won't ruin the story for you by telling you he doesn't see him again. No, I have to know, you have to know that. We're not going to read about Elisha's death today. We're not going to read about Elisha's death. No, we're not going to finish with Elisha today. But he doesn't see him again. But does Elijah die? Now, there are some people who've speculated that I think the more scientific people trying to figure out what happens here want to say that Elijah goes out in a blaze of glory because he's known to play with fire. And that what actually happened was an explosion, which later on was refigured as his exit in a chariot of fire. Why is that? Because he sets things on fire. He's well known. Yeah, he sets those guys on fire. He sets the altar on fire with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. Some people say when he pours water over that, he's actually pouring naphtha on it, which looks like water, but actually is flammable, highly flammable stuff. It's basically the stuff that, like, napalm is based on naphtha. It's kind of like a gasoline type of stuff. But whether he had that ability to work with fire, and that at some point either the stuff blew up, would not with his consent, or on the contrary, that this is the way he wanted to go out.
Isn't there a movie, Chariots of Fire?
Yes, so I said that it's based on these words. That's why Chariots of Fire is such a better translation than fiery chariot. But look, what does he say? He says that when Elisha sees it, he says it's a miracle. The Bible says it's a miracle. The Bible says he's taken away by God on on God's chariot. Yeah, but they also like the idea that he doesn't die,
Right.
which is a problem because everybody dies. So how did Elijah not die? Which then leads to the possibility that he is a special person that doesn't have to die, or that he's an angel. He was always an angel. So both of those possibilities are held out by Jewish sources, because
Moses not die.
Moses does die. Moses, it says, died. We just don't know where it is. So the Bible says at the end of Deuteronomy. We read it last night, actually, that Moses, no, listen, I'm going to show you because it's perfect. It's a perfect time for us to, it's a perfect line to actually say that Moses died. And unlike other people in other traditions, even the greatest prophet is not immune from death. And I think there actually is a important lesson there, which is that, yeah, people are going to die. Let me just,
Everybody dies, even prophets.
yeah, and even this greatest prophet, right? So let me just bring the last line of the Torah up. So this is what we read yesterday. So it says Moses went up to the steppes of Moab, to Mount Nebo, and God showed him the whole land, Gilead as far as Dan. Right? You got to see everything. You got to see north, south, east, west. Got to see the valley of Jericho. We just heard about Jericho. And God said, this is the land, right? This is the land I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to your offspring. I've let you see with your own eyes, but you shall not cross here again. Another reminder, you're not coming in.
You got to see everything, not just.
Yeah, you got to see everything. So he got a very special miracle, which is he got to see the land. He got to see things he couldn't have seen. And the rabbis like to interpret that, by the way, too, that he didn't just get to see geographically, but he also got to see time. He got to see all the way to us, which is an interesting idea, too. A lot of midrash about what Moses gets to see in his last days. We looked at some of them, but it says right there, he died in the land of Moab at the command of Adonai. And we God buried him in the land of Moab. So he gets treated very specially in that God buried him. And no one knows his burial place to this day. And he was 120 when he died. His eyes weren't dim and his vigor unabated, which seems to mean that he was still healthy. Let's put it that way. His vigor unabated. So he dies, though. But there's no question that he dies. And we just don't know where he's buried. So when he gets to see this, when he gets to see it, one of the most powerful midrash about this is, and again, a lot of this gets wrapped up with Elijah, because Elijah is this guy who can go back and forth and then never dies and is always, he's been around for centuries, whatever. But Moses gets to actually see it. And to some extent, you have to almost have that, because how could Elijah get stuff that Moses didn't get?
Moses was before he left.
Yeah, so he's 600 years before him, 500 years, but he could see the future. Well, he got to see the future before he died. Now, assumedly, he also is in heaven, I guess you could say, but he doesn't get eternally live like Elijah does. Yeah.
It all comes from the Septuagint, right?
What do you mean?
The Bible and everything. Here's my question. My question is, the language in which they write, to me, just seems so detailed and so full of color. And back then, when these scribes were doing this seems a little too creative to me. It should be in a simpler form. This doesn't seem simple to me.
Well, no, but why does it have to be simple?
I guess.
The more detailed, the more we need to do.
So what happens here is it not only gives us, because it also gives us the ability to extract other lessons from it. So here, let me give you an example. So the idea that Moses gets to see the future means that he gets to see things that, people don't get. No, but the point of the midrash isn't that Moses gets to see the future, because so people said that, just like Elijah we'll get to the Elijah midrash now, but it's important to understand the Moses midrash too, is that if Moses gets to see it, can he really understand it? So the midrash is that Moses gets to see the future and he gets to see people discussing his Torah. So there's a very famous midrash that he gets to see the future, and he gets to see the rabbis discussing the Torah. And one of the rabbis he gets to see is Rabbi Akiva. And he hears Rabbi Akiva expounding on the Torah. And Moses is blown away. He hears a lot. And remember, Rabbi Akiva lives about 60 years after the destruction of the temple. He lives about 100 years after Jesus. But a lot of what happens to Rabbi Akiva is stuff that happened to Jesus. And that he was martyred, he was tortured. According to the Talmud, his skin is ripped from his living body, right? He's tortured by the Romans to death. So he's a martyr, but he's amazing, has an amazing mind. And Moses is listening to him in the academy teaching, and he's teaching things, and Moses says, I didn't know that this was in the Torah because I didn't see it, right? The language seems like I couldn't, and he's saying, how can he expand it? How can he expound on the Torah like this? Moses says to God, why didn't you give him the Torah? He understands it far better than I do. But God says to Moses, I have my reasons, right? You can't understand it. And then Moses asks God, I want to see the reward for this guy that is more righteous than I am, right? He's smarter than me. He seems more competent than me. I want to see his reward for this. No, he says to God, he's watching Rabbi Akiva in his vision. No, he asks God, what is Rabbi Akiva's reward? And God shows him the next scene, which is Rabbi Akiva's body being tortured by the Romans, by iron combs tearing apart his flesh. And Moses says to God, this is the reward for studying Torah? This is the reward for learning my Torah, for learning your Torah? And God says to Moses, be quiet. I have my ways.
Be silent.
Which is essentially this be silent, which is you, Moses, aren't going to know the answers to my ways, which of course means that you and I aren't going to know the reasons for God's ways. So it's a reason, it's a recognition that stuff seems incredibly wrong in this world. Because when Moses was watching his descendant, Rabbi Akiva, being tortured to death, he says to God, how can this happen? Which of course is the question that every one of us has, right? How can this happen?
And the same question about Jesus, right?
Yeah, well, again, all these stories emanate from the same place, which is this the world that God wants? And again, the responses to that are essentially, up to us, because this is the world that you've created. Keep that in mind as we look at Elijah. Yes. No, Hillel lived a nice long life and had a good life and seems to have been successful, and his descendants and his descent. No, he's about 100 years, 120 years before, 100 years before. So he's a few generations before. But Hillel's grandchildren and great-grandchildren are contemporaries of Rabbi Akiva. Look, Rabbi Akiva pushed the limits, right? He upset the Romans, right? He continued to teach when the Romans said you can't teach Torah. He continued to do it. So the feeling was he asked for it because he did it. And Rabbi Hillel's descendants were the more collaborative. They were more of the collaborator people. They were the people who said, let's not upset. Hillel's descendants said, don't upset the Romans. Hillel's people were the people that were essentially in control. They were the power. They respected Rabbi Akiva, but they thought he was crazy and they thought he asked for it.
It's kind of difficult even during World War II. The Jews kind of went underground, the ones that could. And
Some did.
Right.
Some did, but remember the difference there, Marcia, was they weren't trying to stop us from studying. They were trying to stop us from living. There was no option that said, hey, if you stop studying Torah, if you stop being Jewish, we're going to let you live. That was what the Catholic Church did during the Crusades, right? That was, or during the Inquisition, or during other periods of stop being Jewish and we'll leave you alone. The Holocaust, there was none of that. So, yeah. Well, that did happen. It did happen. There were Christians who got killed by other Christians during the Crusades, And they weren't even like even Catholic and Protestant then. They were just all, well, there were some Eastern Orthodox that got killed. It was really actually bad. The Crusaders sacked Constantinople, which was not Muslim at the time. It was Eastern Orthodox. They sacked it. They killed thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of other Christians. They weren't the right kind of Christians.
Are you the right person? I'm afraid to answer that question. I think this is why scripture is so incredible, just incredible. Even some other adjective that I can't, is that, you know, you have electionary, go over it, ours is every 3 years. And it's always different. It's
Yeah.
always different.
That's what's great about it.
It is, it's just amazing that a portion of scripture can have an interpretation, an appropriate, reasonable interpretation over and over and over.
Yeah.
That's why we read it over and over again.
Right, but one of the most beautiful readings, when you would have the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and we'd all sit here and talk about Jonah. Oh my God.
No, that's not Jonah. That was creation. Jonah, we always do on Yom Kippur. We did Jonah again this year, and we did think about, and by the way, one of the things we did with Jonah this year, which we hadn't done before, so we had the screen and we had the ability to go back and forth. We actually looked at the Elijah story,
Yes, we did.
which I wouldn't have done if we hadn't been reading Elijah and been in the midst of Elijah and going, oh, you remember when Elijah said he wanted to die? Which, by the way, seems to indicate that Elijah is not an angel. Well, I guess you could make the argument that he wanted to leave his earthly form, but he doesn't seem like to say that. He says, I want to die.
The time when you do die, the separation of body and soul. The separation of body. and
There
soul.
definitely does seem to be that, but Elijah doesn't want to be on this planet anymore. Whatever you want to, however you want to understand that, Elijah wants to check out.
You know, there are times I think that that's not an unreal story.
Yep.
Right, and as this world's getting a little bit more difficult
Yeah.
to try to.
But Elijah is told that this is his time. He knows it's his time. A prophet knows. The other prophets know. They actually tell Elisha, you know, he's going to die or he's leaving. And he goes, I know. So they all know. It's not a secret. The other prophets know that this is Elijah's time to leave.
But Reverend, you made point to the personality of him not wanting to be around other people, right?
Oh, we're gonna get to that. So let's read the rest of the final part of this story.
Did we skip something?
No, we read it. He crossed over. He goes
No,
back.
but we
over.
didn't say, where's the Lord, the God of Elijah? We didn't read that yet.
No, we read that.
There we are.
There, I think
I
that's.
think
Okay. Oh, yeah.
he picked up Elijah's mantle.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, hold on a second. Yeah,
No, we
he
read that.
went it in two. Okay, he picked up.
Here's,
read that.
yeah, that's where we are. He picked up Elijah's mantle, which had dropped from him, and he went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. Taking the mantle which had dropped from Elijah, he struck the water and said, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? As he too struck the water, it parted to the right and to the left, and Elisha crossed over.
So, no, he did the same thing. He went back and he did the same thing. He picked up Elijah. Well, let's first say he took Elijah's mantle, right? He took his outer garment that everyone knew that Elijah had. He had this mantle, this covering, the ma'al that he had. Remember, part of that is like pretty dramatic because it seems like Elijah sometimes maybe doesn't wear anything other than his underwear and a cape, right? I don't want to know. Like now I'm gonna have to purge that image from my mind. But the mantle of Elijah is now, and remember, Samuel had a mantle. He had a garment that his mom would give him, and he had that mantle that Saul rips when he tries to get Saul to come back. When Saul rips Samuel's coat, when Samuel is walking away and he rips his coat, and he says, "That's the way your kingdom's going to get ripped from you." So a garment, the outer garment, the outer cloak, if you will, is pretty important. And this is, what is the translate? What's the King James on that? Is a mantle? Yeah. So
This is true for Jesus too.
Yep.
So the cross.
they're ripping his clothes, taking part of his mantle. So your mantle is kind of like your outer garment. It's the part.
Could that be a talit?
What?
I'm just wondering, could it be a talit?
Interestingly, it's not the word we use for talit.
I'm only wondering because the translation of one of my family names is mantel is supposed to derive from mantia for a talit.
Could be, but I do think that when we hear these words for mantle, it's actually kind of the outer cloak that did not necessarily.
You're talking about a heavy garment.
It's more of your the equivalent today would be your jacket, the jacket that you wear over your clothes, so that when you walk into a place, you take off your jacket and now your other clothes. So you wouldn't take off your talit, right? So your talit would be with you the whole time.
Like a serape.
A serape or a toga, your outer toga. Your outer toga. A shroud would be your inner garment, would be what you're buried in. So you would, with your mantle, you would sometimes have like a really long robe or even like a wrap, right? A serape or a something that you would pull off when you got into the house or you got out from the outside, you'd put it down, you take it off. But it's a very important part of Elijah's clothing, and it's something that now has been passed to Elisha. No, well, let's put it this way. It doesn't say that people were wearing a talit that had separate fringes, right? The fringes were on their garments. So their fringes were on the garments that they probably wore, again, all the time, not one that they took off, which is why Orthodox Jews, even to this day, that are wearing, and not just Orthodox, anyone who's wearing tzitzit, they don't call them a talit, it's a tzitzit, right? It's the fringes. The talit is the thing that we wear when we're in prayer that has tzitzit on them, so that we fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit. But if you're wearing tzitzit all the time, it's wearing as an undershirt. It's not an outer cloak. It's not an outer garment. You don't see it. Yeah.
It's interesting, as I was looking up mantle. This lead was called blah, blah, blah. But the second is an important role or responsibility that passes from one person to another. Oh, the second son has now assumed his father's
Mantle. Yep.
mantle.
So it is, it becomes a word that is associated with responsibility. So when the mantle has been passed, yep. And so it's the responsibility that passes when that transfer of power happens, which is the mantle. The mantle represents Elijah's transfer of power to Elisha. Now, again, he also says you're going to get, or because he asked for it and because he saw the stuff, he also gets his spirit, right? So he got part of Elijah's spirit. Well, let's put it this way. He asked for it and Elijah said, you'll get it. We assume that he got it, but it doesn't say that he got it. And we don't know that Elijah can even do that. But he seems to say like it's conditional. If you get to see all this stuff, then essentially you are going to get it. But he definitely gets the mantle, and the mantle still has the power, if you will, to break the Jordan River into two, which it doesn't actually say into two, but because it says it goes to the right and left, just like the garment, just like his garments, they also get split. And so,
Oh, the sermons on this.
yeah. And here are the witnesses again to what happens.
When the disciples of the prophets at Jericho saw him from a distance, they exclaimed, "The spirit of Elijah has settled on Elisha." And they went to meet him and bowed low before him to the ground.
They definitely believe that the Ruach has been transferred, and that's the word, Ruach Eliyahu, the spirit of Elijah is now on Elisha. So they believe that it's been transferred, okay? They are now recognizing Elisha as the inheritor of this power. And it says they bowed low to him, right? And here's what they said.
They said to him, "Your servants have 50 able men with them. Let them go and look for your master. Perhaps the spirit of the Lord has carried him off and cast him upon some mountain or into some valley." "Do not send them," he replied.
So that's weird. They come back and they say, hey, let's send some people to see where Elijah went. Maybe the spirit of the Lord, which is interesting, that's the word, same word, Ruach Adonai. Maybe the spirit, maybe, but it's interesting, it's the same word, right? It's the Ruach. So whatever the spirit, and you could be, again, the wind of God. No, let me just say, because the whirlwind, right, is a different word. The whirlwind is a Sa'ara Hashamayim. So that's not that kind of wind. But whatever happened, they say, let's look for Elijah's body. Perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has carried him off and cast him upon some mountain or in some valley, which is weird because that means let's go search for his body.
What is that mountain outside?
No, I mean, it would be, it's not in that area. It's in Jordan.
Spirit, in the Genesis story.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which spirit is that?
that's a ruach.
It's-
It's the same word.
I don't know how you know.
Well, we just read it, actually. I'm gonna say, in all fairness, the word is in my, that word is in my head because I read it. I sometimes, if I didn't know it, if I hadn't read it last night, I wouldn't have also said with definitive, with definitive. But since I don't ever, it says I don't ever want to ever say anything definitively without showing it, because there it is. When God began to create heaven and earth, and it says the earth being unformed with darkness, it says right here, God's horrible translation. It says, I'll just show you, Ruach Elohim, which Mary's translation, the King James will say, what does it say in verse 2? Yeah. So there you have it right there, the word, same word, Ruach Elohim. So yes, you're absolutely right though to connect these words, right? To say, hey, we've heard the Spirit.
We use the translation and not always a good translation, and these words could have meant something different.
Correct, but it is the same word, right? So the word, the question is it the same word, Ruach? And it is. Here it actually says Ruach Adonai, the spirit of Adonai, rather than Ruach Elohim, but it's the same.
It's the spirit of creation and life.
Yeah, well, remember, chapter 1 only refers to God as Elohim. There is no Adonai in chapter 1. There's only Elohim. Elohim is God, is the translation for God. Oh, we believe it is. We believe it is, but if you want to, and again, I'm not saying that there's a difference here, because in this author, in this writing, in this version, it is Adonai. And it says the Spirit of the Lord. But again, it seems to be a similar idea, which is maybe God's energy threw him off, and maybe his body is lying somewhere. Let's go find him. We don't want to leave Elijah's body out there. You say he went up in the sky, but maybe God's done with him. Maybe God threw him back. I mean, all of these things they're wondering what happens. They weren't there. They didn't see it. Elijah tells them he got taken up. They know that something happened. It's not like they think Elisha killed him. It's not like they're denying that, but they say maybe his body's out there. How do we know? What does God do with somebody after they take him up? Let's go find his body. And Elisha said, you don't have to. Don't go.
So don't go because something bad might become you.
What happens?
But they kept pressing him for a long time until he said, send them. So they sent out 50 men who searched for 3 days, but did not find him.
So they went. Yeah, it's 3 days, right? It's showing again that there's more. They said it's not like they just went out for a day. 3 days shows intention, right? It's 50. Yes, it's 50. It's a lot of people, but it's like 50 days. It's 50 people over 3 days. It's a lot of people. It's a big group of people that went out and looked for him. So they searched the area. They did a search, did not find him. And he told them not to do it.
They came back to him while he was still in Jericho, and he said to them, I told you not to go. The men of the town said to Elisha, look, the town is a pleasant place to live in, as my Lord can see. but the water is bad and the land causes bereavement. He responded, bring me a new dish and put salt in it. They brought him to him. He went to the spring and threw salt into it. And he said, thus said the Lord, I heal this water. No longer shall death and bereavement come from it.
So there's Elisha's little miracle that he just did. Elisha just cured the water.
And this is river water then, not ocean.
No, no, it's not good water. It's not good water.
Where is the sticky water?
It's,
A river.
yeah, it's coming from.
A
It's
sulfur spring or something like that.
it's coming from, it's the, whatever you'd call it, it's the water table, right? So it's getting into wells, it's getting into, interesting, right? What miscarriages. What is the King James? It's not gonna have that commentary, but what does it say? It causes, no, what? It's in the text? What does it say?
Thus says the Lord, I have made this water wholesome henceforth, neither death nor miscarriage shall come to. Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Death and bereavement.
Death or barren.
Oh, okay. Interesting that it's associated with.
Miscarriage didn't mean miscarriage. They mean that way.
No, they use it earlier too.
Go on. Lo ye misham.
It says the land is unfruitful.
Yeah, I have to say. They open up that possibility with the word bereavement. I shall call it, but interestingly, I don't know whether if that translation has to be just for people or
Well, it sort of says both. Of this translation. The land is unfruitful, and then it talks about miscarriage. And that would be fruitful.
Could the salt water not be the ocean? Or the too far away?
let me just see.
I know they did. I'm just asking, where did it come from? So could it have been, it flowed from the ocean? Could it have been, or just is? They just added.
It's interesting, we make holy water by adding salt to water
Really?
and then bless it.
Interesting. Well, Rashi's commentary, right, from the Middle Ages, he says, now is not salt the thing that spoils water? This was a miracle within a miracle. So it seems to be, again, a little bit along the lines of what Elijah does when he throws water on the altar, which is, there's no fire. You're going to put out fire with water. You're going to make water nastier with more salt. But he's showing, I can do miracles with things that you don't think. Yeah, but it doesn't give us that translation that it's called. It's interesting though that they believe that the water could actually cause miscarriages. It's interesting. Because it could be, it could be understood that way, but it also could be understood that it's causing death and it's also causing, there seems to be understanding from this word in Hebrew, mishakalit, which is considered connected to death, that it's either the death of the land, it's death of people, but it's not just it's making them sick.
But the death of the land would lead to the death of people.
Sure, not fruitful. And fertility would be not fruitful, right?
Well, I will tell you this. Not that I don't want to split hairs here, but it really does say the water is bad and the land causes death. Okay, so that's what they said in the first place, or I'm just showing you. It says the water is bad and the land causes death or bereavement. But it's almost a poetic phrase, right? Which is they're saying the water's bad and the land causes the water's bad and the land causes death. And when he's done with it, he says, I heal this water, no longer shall death and bereavement come from it. So he doesn't really address in the last, when he heals the water, he doesn't really heal the earth, but the assumption kind of is that both of them are going to get fixed now that the water is better. But he doesn't say that land. Initially, it's the land is also death, Here, the words Mavet, death and destruction are used together, whereas in the first part of it, it doesn't actually say death, it says bad, ra'ah, and bereavement, and here it says death and bereavement. So the words are slightly different, but it seems to be the intention is saying that, again, this is toxic, the land is toxic.
Water land for crops, and if water is bad.
Yeah.
Isn't this when the tribes would move on? I mean, they move on to. the other-
Well, again, they're saying, look, this is a really nice place to live. Remember what the guy said to them. Look, this is a beautiful town, but the water is bad. And again, yes, it comes out of that. But when they finally say he cures the water, he now says death and bereavement. He doesn't use the word badness. He says death, which is assumedly, again, it's paralleled with the word ra'ah there.
I'm not a visual of Death Valley. Okay? Death Valley has areas where there is that salt, right? And then you move on, and then you come to these areas that are very fertile, and the palm trees are growing, and
Yeah,
you know, I kind of seeing that visually,
maybe.
that they're just roaming
It
around.
could be, and it could be that it's again in that area, you
Do they
know,
stay there, or do they move on?
well, let's see.
Okay.
Let's see what happens. Here,
The water has remained wholesome to this day in accordance with the words spoken by
Yay.
Elisha.
it's fixed, but we don't know exactly where that is, but but they don't say that. Well, read the next line.
From there, he went up to Bethel. As he was going up the road, some little boys came out of the town and jeered at him, saying, "Go away, bald head, go away, bald head."
So this is where we got bullying.
Yes, yes, I mentioned what's good. So again, he's walking back. He was down here. He's backtracking, right? He's going back the way he came. He was down here. We don't know exactly where the town was where the water was bad, but he's making his way back up to Bethel. He's going back up north, right? He's going back up from Jericho, back up. He's going back up through the land. So he gets to this spot. We did not know. The Bible never really gives us many physical descriptions of people, but he is bald. Go away, bald head. This is not the way you should treat anybody. And by the way, if you want to know why you're not supposed to treat anybody this way, well, it's not nice. It's not a nice thing to do. But yeah, you don't treat people. There's a lesson in this story.
Yeah.
I would have said.
He turned around and looked at them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. Thereupon, 2 she-bears came out of the woods and mangled 42 of the children.
Yay! Yay! So this is what I said last night. There are children in the story, but it's not a children's story. I would tell you.
Only if you don't like your kids.
Reverend Lynn, how did you teach this story in Sunday school?
Oh, let's skip that.
So this is why I tell people the Bible is not, I said this last night, the Bible is not a book for children. Kids would stop bullying, that's right.
There's so many boys, only boys.
Yeah.
But, so a group of small boys, but now there are a bunch of, there are at least 42.
Yeah. So it just said, originally it said some little boys. It just said Naharim Katanim, which again, are little boys. I mean, there's not a question. These are not teenagers. Well, unless they were very little people, little teenagers. I mean, I never thought of it that way. It's also not any better. I don't want to say it's any better because I guess they weren't kids. They weren't little kids. I mean, assumedly they are little kids, which seems kind of harsh, right? This is a tough.
Would not be unlikely.
Okay, well, let's look at all our look, the Bible has a problem here because it introduced a really bad idea for us, which is that a bunch of kids can get killed for being mean kids. So here's what Rashi says, and he saw them. He saw that neither in them nor in their descendants were there any good deeds. I don't know, any sap of any good, any sap of a good deed, right? There's nothing good in these kids or their descendants. So he knew it can be gone. So look, this is a problem, right? This is not, let's see, this commentary just says a shocking incident.
Yes.
Yeah, look, it's a tough scene, right?
But I think that's all.
Yeah, but I will,
But it's not maybe using this as an example, maybe this is just far exaggeration.
Well, it's, right, it is lacking in any sort of human, just, the prophet is not disturbed by this, he just goes
Yeah.
on.
But you also remember who wrote
It's
it?
after his.
He wrote it.
And this is Elisha, right? Not
Right.
yeah, this is the lead.
Well, yes, but Elisha spoke like.
Elijah, yes, this is the type of thing that we would see Elijah do.
That would be very.
So this is conducive with this idea that you do not, these are not guys you want to mess with.
I would have listened to you.
So this is a miracle. These bears were not going to be messing with the people otherwise. By the way, they're she bears. They're she bears, right? They're dubim. They're bears who, yeah, and he invoked God's name to do it, right? So this was a miracle, right? He cursed them in the name of God, right? So he has the power to do stuff, which is what Elijah did too. He burned up 2 groups of 50 soldiers that came after him. Again, I'm not saying that they were good soldiers and you can't use the argument they were just following orders, but they weren't going to kill him. It's not good. Some of these kids,
This was the lesson.
yeah, yeah.
Go for
You mean just they got scratched a little bit?
it. But
Yeah, no, they,
survived, hey.
look,
Commentary says that 2 is the number of an ill omen.
An ill omen.
I guess,
Just, checking,
Minhaya,
10 verse 14.
chapter 10,
Verse 14.
chapter 10 of this book. Maybe. Look, the rabbis, the commentary on this is very, 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 very hard to find.
So it's
There's not a lot of midrash on this because it's not good. It's a shocking incident because it doesn't seem like the thing that this is not the way people should normally react for being teased. Now, it's not a good thing to be teased, but it also seems to be a heavy duty overreaction.
So does 42 just become symbolic of a bad number?
Well, that's what Reverend Lynn says. That's what Reverend,
That verse said,
that's what Rev-
said, take the queen mother. Oh, I'm sorry, he said, take them alive, and they took them alive and slew them in the pit of Beth. 42 persons, and he spared none of them.
Oh, he spared none of them. There's the answer to that one. Wow.
So interestingly, they're talking about, what verse is that in?
10, 14.
Okay, so, okay, I'm in 9.
I've never noticed that before.
What
It's
do you-
like the stuff that happens in the original Grimm's fairy tales,
That's right.
where the wicked stepsisters get strapped into red hot shoes and have to dance till they die.
That's it. Ooh.
Yeah, the kids' tales that they didn't have an issue telling kids this story, by the way. I just wanted to say that back in the day, they did teach kids this story. I mean, they didn't. I mean, they
They-
didn't take it. They
They
didn't take,
lived in a violent world and they accepted that.
so, yeah, here's the line that we're talking about. That there's 42 people that are slaughtered. This is what King Yehu does. This is a story that we're going to get to in a few weeks. And it is interesting because 42 is not a number that we normally see.
Secret of the Universe. If you're a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan.
Yeah, that's true. 3. What is the number? Yeah, so is there a significance to that? I don't know. Let's read the last line here, though.
He went on from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria.
So he went up to Mount Carmel, which is further north, and then he comes back down to Samaria, which is where Elijah was, where they were. Now, I will tell you that today, before we wrap up, and because we're done with Elijah, we're not really done with Elijah, because Elijah has transferred his power to Elisha. Elisha seems to be as somewhat violent with it as possible. It's pretty extreme. Let's take a look at Elijah before we go. So Elijah, we know from elsewhere in the Bible, and this is what I said, the prophet Malachi. He was one of the last prophets. And Malachi says to the people at the end of his book, be mindful of the teaching of my servant Moses, right? These are things that God says. He's speaking in the words of God, whom I charged at Horeb, Mount Sinai, with laws and rules for all Israel. And then we come to the end of the book. Lo, this is the prophet Malachi, which is either chapter 3 or chapter 4, if depending on the Bible. I think the Christian Bible has it in chapter 4, interestingly. But it's the end. It's the last verses. Does your Bible have chapter 4? I think it does. Yeah. So in the Hebrew Bible, here's the difference, is we only have 3 chapters. So here's the reference here. This is the end, right? This is the end. So it says, lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome and fearful day of the Lord. He shall reconcile parents with children and children with their parents, so that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. Is that the last words of the book, Prophet Malachi? You have, Mary? Yeah. Cherem, which is the last word.
Right, but it's reconcile versus he said smite, right? Is that different?
What? Yeah.
He said smite, it says reconcile.
No. A smite, it's either smite or curse. The destruction or curse. It's not good. Yeah. So Elijah is going to come to you before that awesome and fearful day. Right? And he's going to, what's he going to do? Well, he's going to come to earth before the awesome and fearful day of the God. And he shall reconcile parents with children and children with parents. So that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. Which seems to imply 2 things. One is that Elijah comes before the end of that reality, right? Whatever it is. And that if Elijah comes, he's going to fix things so that it's not a complete disaster. So Elijah has a very important role to play, which is that he is going to come before the end of the days, whatever that day looks like. Now, the awesome and fearful day could also be translated as a great and awesome day. Does not have to be destructive. The last word seems to be destructive, but it seems to be conditional. Because if people can rectify or fix their situation, they will not be destroyed. And interestingly, what does it say specifically that parents and children are going to get along? Is if they don't, the whole world is going to be destroyed. Which, by the way, to some extent, by the way, seems to imply that if parents and children don't get along, there's no hope.
I would tend to agree that holds true today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this is a understanding that generationally people have to get along, otherwise it's not going to work. No, but generationally, this is the focus on generation. Now, what's interesting about this is that this gets turned on its head by Christianity. Because Jesus essentially tells the people, families are going to be torn apart by what's going to happen. When I come here and I've told you these things, There are people that are not going to get with it, and children and parents are not going to be together on this. He says to them, I tell you that families are going to be split apart over my message. This is scary because he says that maybe that won't happen. Maybe that won't happen. Maybe that part of the message won't happen.
Is it part of the resurrection? No.
What happens when the tribulation, this time happens, is that this is going to happen. The Christian Bible written afterwards says that maybe what's happened is so bad that I'm just going to tell you what, I'm going to tell you what my reading of that is, which is that when Jesus tells his disciples that you're going to have families split apart over this, in most cases, what I think he's telling the people is that your parents are not going to get this. They are living the old way and their minds can't wrap their heads around this. And you're going to have to not expect your parents to get this. Now, again, it could be that some of the people who get it are the older people and the kids won't get it. But because he doesn't say it's all the kids, that you guys get it and you don't. But look, there's a definite understanding of that version that I just shared with you in Jesus Christ Superstar, which is your generation of parents are destroying the world. And I'm here to tell you, which is why the story was so powerful, set in the 60s, which is that your parents have destroyed things. I'm going to fix it, but your parents aren't going to get it. And there was at least that reading of it back then. And I think there still is that kind of radical idea that generations have, which is our parents don't understand. They're destroying the world and we're going to fix it. And who cares what they say? The Bible, at least in Malachi, is saying that's not the way it's going to be. If parents can't reconcile with their parents, if children can't reconcile together, by the way, and it says reconcile parents with children and children with parents. It goes both ways. It doesn't say parents have to accept their children. It says children have to accept their parents. And what I always say is we read this every year at the Shabbat before Passover. So the week before Passover, we read this because Elijah comes to us at Passover.
Oh, there you go.
But it's not just because Elijah comes to us at Passover. It's because we get together with our families at Passover. And if you can't figure out how to get with your parents at Passover, Elijah can't come. Or maybe Elijah's going to have to come and fix it. And when Elijah fixes it, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be easy.
Because of all the holidays, at least personally, that I celebrate, my children are certainly at my Seder day, where it representing them. Before it's not the same, but Passover, oh my God, we're going to Passover. I don't, but that's interesting because that is the expectation. I've removed that expectation, but that's what it says. You know, parents, child, parent. But also generationally, I feel that I've really I've kind of followed my grandparents, my parents to me, but my kids is a whole different enchilada right now. They don't embrace. Mark, you and I talked about it last week.
Yep.
There's a different.
So let's take a look at Matthew, the Christian Bible, and where Elijah pops up there several times. Here, Elijah, correct. And they understood this guy, John the Baptist, who was very popular at the time of Jesus, kind of prefigures Jesus, right? Truly, I tell you, among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been subjected to violence, and violent people have been raiding it. For all the prophets in the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come. Whoever has ears, let them hear. So Jesus just told the people that Elijah was John the Baptist. He just told them he's the guy that you've been waiting for to tell you the message. And what he's also telling them, you're not listening.
And according to Christian tradition, John the Baptist is the last prophet.
Really?
So John fulfills that mission. Now, what's interesting is that means that John was the embodiment, and to some extent, to people would say that was Elijah, that John actually was Elijah. And that was it. So that's how Elijah comes back as John. Look, this idea that Elijah comes back as other people is really important because the Nation of Islam believes that Elijah Muhammad was the incarnation of Elijah. And so Elijah coming back as an incarnation is very important to people and still plays out that Elijah would come back and that he would be here. I will tell you, what?
All three of the Abraham.
Yes. So Elijah figures into our Midrash and into our Talmud. Here's a version of it that is very famous, written around the same time as the Christian scriptures. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi met Elijah while the prophet was standing in the entrance to the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is in Israel. Rabbi Yehoshua asked him in the north, "Do I have a place in the world to come?" And Elijah replied, "If the master desires it." I don't know, but Elijah is there to answer questions for the rabbis. And we say, Elijah, when we ask for Elijah to come, we ask for him to come to help us answer questions that we don't have the answer to.
Elijah's not different.
So as Elijah spoke, Rabbi Yehoshua looked about in wonderment. Perhaps it was only the echo from the cave which he stood, but later on when he would speak of this meeting, Elijah would say, "I saw two of us, but I heard the voice of a third." Rabbi Yehoshua asked Elijah another question. When will the Messiah come? Which is what, of course, everyone wants to know from Elijah. Elijah answered, go and ask him himself. Rabbi Yehoshua was amazed. You mean I could find him? This is a version of it. This is not exactly the way the Talmud says it. Where is he? You could find him at the gates of Rome. How will I recognize him at the gates of Rome? Asked Rabbi Yehoshua, and Elijah told him, there he sits among the lepers, whom you will find unwinding all of their bandages at the same time and then covering their sores with clean bandages. The Messiah is the only one who unwinds and rewinds his bandages one at a time, thinking, I want to be ready at a moment's notice if I am called. So what is it?
Two Jesus stories.
Yep. The lepers.
Healing of the 10 lepers, and then going and getting what's his name out of the cave? He was dead for 3 days already.
Yeah. For Lazarus.
Right.
Rabbi Yehoshua traveled from the cave of it's not over. He traveled from the cave of Shimon Bar Yochai all the way to Rome. So first of all, by the way, it tells us that the reason that Elijah does that, he wraps the bandages individually, is because he wants to be always ready to go. At any time I can come. At any time the Messiah could come. I could come anytime when God tells me. So Rabbi Yehoshua traveled from the cave all the way to Rome, a journey that seemed like took only a few steps. He wasn't frightened by being at the gates of the enemy, nor the pitiful condition of lepers. Keeping in mind Elijah's voice of how to identify the Messiah in the most unlikely of places, among the most wretched of people, he quickly spotted the one poor sufferer who was unwrapping and rewrapping only one sword at a time. Rabbi Yehoshua approached him and says, peace be upon you, my master and teacher. The leper looked knowingly at him and replied, peace be upon you, son of Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua, when will the master come? Today, said the leper. Rabbi Yehoshua returned to Elijah in the blink of an eye. Elijah said to him, what did the Messiah say to you? Rabbi Yehoshua replied, he said, peace be upon you, son of Levi. As to your first question of me, he assured that you and both you and your father have a place in the world to come. So you don't have to worry about going to heaven. Rabbi Yehoshua said, but he lied to me, saying, today I'll come, but he's not come. And Elijah said, no, he did not say he'd come today. Rather, he was quoting a verse from Psalm saying, today, if only you will listen to his voice.
That's interesting.
So you only heard what you wanted to hear. You only heard that he's coming today,
Not the rest of
but not the rest of it. Are you ready? Because essentially there's an interesting possibility here, which is Rabbi Yehoshua is so excited. He gets the answer to his question. But think about it. He didn't take part in taking care of the leper. The Messiah was there with the leper, but he wasn't. So what does it tell us? It tells us that we're not ready. We want the Messiah to come, but we're not ready. And this gives the rise to the legends that we have about Elijah, that he's anywhere. He could be anyone. And that Elijah,
Which is true of Jesus.
yeah, and that Elijah could be the homeless person that you see on the street and you walk by, and he's the person that comes to your house on a Shabbat asking for a meal, and do you turn him away? Which is what happens in the legends, right? Elijah comes to people's homes and kind of tests them to see if they're ready. Is Elijah ready? Are we ready for Elijah, right? Is this the time? So Elijah coming to us is a signal that we're living in a messianic age, right? It's the real question, right? So we don't know. We don't know if the homeless person that we just walked past and didn't want to look at was that guy. That's the possibility. So, it's an interesting set of legends. There's so many of them. We could spend
They're so wonderful.
we could spend days and days looking at these legends. And the stories go throughout history, from the Talmud all the way up to, the Hasidic stories about Elijah. There's beautiful legends about Elijah. But it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And I have to tell you, you see, the Elijah is depicted as a hairy man with a mantle, with disheveled, maybe wearing a robe. And he wouldn't necessarily be the person that you'd want to have around.
Haven't we had someone yesterday, last night, is that what you're thinking? mean,
I don't know what I'm thinking, Marcia.
You know who I'm talking about. He's
Perhaps,
a spirit
perhaps I,
You know what, he was chanting in Hebrew, he was following the Hebrew chant last night.
Mike knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, too.
No.
I thought that was funny.
Folks, for those who were here last night, and you don't know, who knows?
He's quiet.
Marcia, I'll answer you the question with this.
Okay, you don't have to.
No, I thought about this passage when I drove him home last night
Okay.
to the homeless shelter on Pine Street.
That's what I thought. Where you live. That's what I thought.
Really?
Yeah.
But the
Yes.
rabbi, not one
Oh,
of them
okay, there you go.
and throw
See?
it home.
See? Okay, yes.
And that's where he slept last
Well,
night.
that's one. This is,
I took him.
this is him today. He's been rough.
I don't know.
That's exactly what I'm
I
saying.
don't know. I didn't see him drink out of wine.
The Jewish midrash. That's right.
So all I can tell you is you never know, Marcia. You never know. And that's why I thought about this last night, and I knew we were going to read this today. And that's why, yeah. It's hard to think about that without
He chanted Hebrew. I was watching him last.
without crying a little bit. So anyways, we'll see you all next week or tomorrow night.
I think you're supposed to.
So anyways, we'll see you next week, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mary, there's one more tiny little piece. Want to take it home?
Oh,
Happy birthday, Jeff.
Okay.
Happy birthday.
One more tiny little